Welcome to Ordinary Teachers and Students, where we get to hear teachers and students tell us their extraordinary stories. My hope is that through this podcast, ordinary teachers from around the world can relate to the stories they hear and get some timely suggestions and ideas. My name is Alan Cheng, and I'm a life coach as well as a university lecturer. My vision is to make life coaching a part of every school. Today, I'm delighted to invite Oscar Tso onto our podcast. So Oscar is actually a teacher now, but I've invited him to talk about his student days because we go way back. He was my student between secondary 3 to 6, which is like year 9 to 12 in England. While at university, he then came back to the school to do an internship before becoming a teaching assistant, and then a teacher. So my student became my colleague. And the story doesn't end there. After I went to university to teach, he was a student on my course, and I was even assigned to supervise him for his teaching practice. So I always told Oscar, please stop following me. Anyway, let's see what we can learn from Oscar's student days. Welcome, Oscar.
Hello. I guess it's just faith that
Really?
we always see each other. Like even in university when I was doing my PhD, I guess it's just faith.
Maybe, yeah.
Yes.
I reckon you're
Yeah.
just following me around. Anyway, do you have anything to add to
All
that intro? Anything else that you want people to know about you?
right. I think that's pretty much what I am now. A
Yeah.
teacher, a student in the past.
Okay, so let's go straight back to your student days then. So like I said, today you have your student hat on. So anything, or maybe my first question would be, what was school like for you? Maybe if we start with like primary or secondary, if you remember those days.
I think it's more like a place for me to just to have fun and hang around with friends. And really, my parents didn't really force me to like study really hard, as long as I'm getting at least a pass in the subjects that I'm not really good at, and maybe a higher score in subjects that I'm good at. So I don't really feel the pressure of studying and maybe getting a very good result. So that is why I kind of had the attitude of not really paying attention in class and just like kind of like messing around with my classmates, just constantly chatting or just doing other things that are not related. Yeah, so it's just like it's more like a place to just for me to like stay out of the house, because I don't like really staying in one space for a long period of time back then. So it's
Is there a reason why? Or was there a reason why?
You mean a reason why I don't like staying in the same place for too long? I think it's just my characteristic of like just like going out, and a school is really like a place like every now and then you can just leave the classroom and go to other classrooms or maybe have a recess. So yeah, because like if you just stay at home, it's not like I don't really enjoy just staying at home for too long. Yeah.
Sure. So basically, your parents weren't really the typical Chinese tiger parents where they just hoped that you got very good academic results, right?
No, I mean, in primary school, when I was in primary school, they did kind of like at least they made sure that I finished my homework. That's all. And but then like in terms of the
quality
results,
didn't matter too much.
the quality didn't really matter.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as I don't. Yeah.
So when you look back at your school days, like would you say what words would you use to describe your school days?
I would say if I was not in a lesson, then obviously okay, because basketball was kind of like my thing and my only interest. So like if I was in the basketball court, then I would be like enjoying myself, of course. But then inside a lesson, I would say it's quite boring most of the time, because back then the teachers are quite I mean, the learning is it's just one way. It's
Mm,
always just teacher talk.
mm,
And especially like subjects which are quite technical, like math,
mm,
physics,
mm,
not a lot of discussion going around. So it's just like whatever the teacher says, and then we just try to take notes,
mm.
try to understand. And
Okay.
it's always quite one way. So it's quite boring for me.
Sure. Um, is there a particular area of your school life that you wanted to talk about a bit more? Because obviously just now you've talked about how you enjoyed the part where you could play basketball, but
Mm,
you've also mentioned like within the classroom, there are times where you felt rather bored because of the
mm,
subjects, right?
yeah. Uh, I would say like when I was in S4, I started from S4, and then
Mm,
like thinking about it now, like think about my senior secondary school,
mm,
uh, my life in it. I regret the choices that I've made
mm,
because obviously I was not very good at math, but then for some reason I still chose physics, algebra, and all these
mm,
kind of subjects that related to calculation. But
mm,
then obviously I didn't do really good. And then in the end, now because English is also one of my interests, so in
mm,
the end, as I graduated from secondary school, I chose a different subject. But then, um, because of my results back then in secondary school, I couldn't get into a very good school.
mm,
And now it actually takes me longer to get to where I
mm,
wanted to
mm,
go.
mm, mm,
Like even for being a teacher, I have to spend 3 extra years or
mm,
longer to just to get to where I am now, which kind
mm.
of like it's like think about what I have decided in the past. Like really, sometimes I regret what I've chosen.
Sure.
Mm,
And if we try to maybe zoom in a little bit on the choices that you made back in the day then. So you said that like moving from secondary three to secondary four when you had to choose your senior secondary subjects, right?
mm,
You chose like
yep.
physics and maths, like algebra. Why would you choose those subjects then if you knew that you weren't particularly interested in those subjects or you're quite bored in the classroom?
Mm. I think uh it's kind of I was kind of influenced by my friends, not
Mm,
I mean because I try to be with my friends more. So
mm.
kind of like back then I didn't really have like an idea of what I want to choose.
Mm,
So I just like, oh, whatever my friends are choosing, I just
mm,
choose the
mm,
same too. So
mm,
most of my
mm,
friends were taking maths and physics, so I just decided to
mm.
follow, which
Mhm.
was kind of like a stupid decision that I've made
Did they do well
because I
in
was
maths and
yeah,
physics?
of course they did very well. And
Mm,
then I was just kind of like trying to understand or trying to listen
mm,
while they were doing very good in the
mm.
subjects that they have chosen.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about it now, can you understand the teenage yourself? Like, so at that time, like choosing it because of friends, can you empathize with yourself?
I think so because back then I really like really treasure the friendship that I have
Mm,
with my friends. I really didn't have like an idea of what I wanted to be,
mm.
and it's really like it really depends on what my friends decide or what they're doing. I just kind of like follow along.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, like, so do you feel that teachers could have influenced that choice? So was it that your teachers didn't talk to you? Clearly, you didn't have a very good class teacher back then, right? So,
Mm, I think yeah, I think back then it's not as I wouldn't say like I would say that the teachers back then they were not as serious as the teachers are now in terms of like I mean now they offer a lot of help even
mm,
though they're not they're not an expert, or they're very serious with
So you're suggesting that your class teacher
with
back then did not help you, Mr. Cho?
I mean,
Be careful of your words.
that's one of the things. I
No,
mean,
no, carry on. Just kidding.
we didn't receive a lot of help. At least that's what I thought back then.
Yeah.
And
I would say this. I'll probably just
yeah,
interject here just
yeah.
to give the audience a bit more context.
Mm,
So I was his class teacher or the film tutor at the time.
mm,
And I think you're probably right in saying that I was also not particularly well informed because it was my first
mm,
time taking a class from secondary 4 to secondary 6. And so,
mm,
yeah, I was also learning
mm,
kind of how to advise students as well. Yeah.
mm. Yeah. So like as a teacher now, I would sometimes see a lot of like talks, or
Mm,
a lot of kind of like visits outside of school, and then kind of like help students to get a general idea of what um, the post-secondary education or career is like. And back then, I either I don't remember, or they didn't have it. It's like at least there were not a lot of visits
mm.
or talks that are related to choosing your path after you've graduated from secondary school.
Yeah, sure. Um, but if I ask you now, like
Mhm.
imagine you're 13, 14 years old, would you have imagined that you would become a teacher?
Obviously, no.
Mm,
I kind of like really have decided to be a teacher when in my first 3 years of working in here, Lotting Pong. Because
mm.
even when I graduated from university, I had no clue of what I
Mm,
wanted to do.
mm.
It was until you called me saying that there's a vacancy for the teaching assistant position,
Mm, mm,
and then, oh, why not give it a go? And then now I'm here.
mm,
I've been
mm,
here for 6 years.
An
Yeah.
experienced teacher now. So
Mhm.
after saying all that now, and you look back at your school days, would there be anything that you would change about how you approach school?
I would say I think I mentioned earlier before, it's really like the decisions I made,
Mm,
and kind of like how I approach learning. It's really kind of like drags uh takes a lot of time
mm,
for
mm,
me
mm,
to get to where I uh want to go.
mm,
Like even
mm,
for after I graduated from secondary school, I didn't go straight to university. I actually
mm,
did a higher diploma,
mm,
uh which was not the best thing, obviously, for a student after
mm,
graduating. But then I was lucky enough to get into senior year
mm,
to another school, to another university, which however, some of my other classmates, they actually spent longer. They have to spend longer to become a teacher. So I was actually quite lucky to
mm.
have saved a few years
Mm.
as well.
Okay.
And then I think also because of the my results in secondary school, which leads to me not being able to apply for PGDE in my first 2 years. Actually, I had to wait until the third year for an interview and an offer. Yeah, so I think because universities really they also look at, like, even after you've graduated for so long, they still look at how you perform in secondary school,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is quite rare. Which that now, because of my results and how I studied, and then
Mm,
kind of like, yeah, I had to wait for a long time
mm,
until I
mm, mm,
get an email for an interview, and
yeah.
yeah, get an offer in the university as well.
So the sense of like lost time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if you could give advice to current teachers who have
Mm,
students like you, so again, if we paint that image of you back in the day, rather playful, didn't know what you wanted to do, um, and yeah, you basically just chose things based on what your friends
mm,
were choosing, right? What
mm,
advice would you give to current teachers with students like you?
mm. I would say kind of just really think about how, just reflect on uh the time when or I was a student.
Mm,
Uh, like it really depends on how you yourself approach learning in school. Because
mm,
now for me, I would say, I always say to students, all right, you have to work hard now.
mm,
Otherwise, you're gonna waste a lot of time in the future. Try to catch up with
mm,
uh
mm,
yeah, what you should do in order to get to where you are or where you want to
mm,
be.
mm,
I think having this mindset is very important because it kind of helps you. It kind of helps you approach that student as well. So if you don't have the
mm,
mindset of working hard and
mm,
having an actual, like a really good target, or having an actual target, it's really hard for you to teach the
mm,
students as well, because if you don't
mm,
have the mindset. And a lot of
yeah.
times now I see a lot of times in teachers nowadays, they're just here, they're just in the classroom just to teach, and then they don't really spend time uh, talking to students about other
Mm,
things, um, like the family, like
mm,
how they choose different things
mm, mm,
and making good decisions. Is it like they just come in, they
mm,
talk, and then when the bell rings, then they just leave?
mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm. That's
And then
interesting. Yeah.
there's not a lot of interaction between students and
Mm,
the teachers.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking while you were speaking just now that you're probably the perfect teacher for yourself, right? So if you could teach yourself
Mm,
back in the
mm,
day, like you, so I guess you're now probably the best kind of teacher to teach the type of students that you were, where you're
mm,
more likely to reach out to the students, have a chat with them beyond what
mm,
you're teaching them, and actually be able to have that perspective. So just now you mentioned like kind of think back to your student days, right? We were all once students, and
mm,
sometimes we might forget how difficult it is actually for students. I mean, I think the really good example is what you said about choosing subjects based on what your friends chose. I think
mm,
it's such a common thing to happen, like just because peer
mm.
relationships are so important at the time, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for that. That's great. Are you
Mm.
ready for the quick fire questions where I ask you a number of questions, but you try to respond as quickly as you can and as concisely as you can?
Okay, yeah, no worries.
Okay, the first one is, how did teachers describe you back then?
I never asked them, but then I feel like they think that I'm a very lazy student because I didn't really
Mm,
hand in my homework, or I didn't hand in on time, or the quality wasn't really good.
mm,
I'm also kind of like I would say it's a very talkative
mm.
student as well, because I just talk nonstop in
Lazy and
class and
talkative.
outside. Yeah, lazy and talkative, the worst combination you have in a classroom, because first they don't do work, and then they just disturb other people as well.
Mm. How about your classmates? How would they describe you?
Friendly, I guess. I
Mm.
really don't know, because I've
Friendly.
never
Mm.
asked them, and I'm not sure how they think about me. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. Okay. How about your favorite classroom activity, like as a student?
Mm. I would say really it's to, like, if there's a chance of group discussions or
Mm.
interaction, I would be very attentive when
Yeah,
I'm
yeah. So when you have a
doing
chance
those
to
kind of things,
interact
because
with other
yeah,
people. Mm.
because yeah, interact with people.
Yeah, you've kind of answered my next question because my next question was
Mm.
kind of like, what was the most helpful tool or activity that
Mm.
you felt helped you learn better?
Mm.
Would that be also group discussions or?
Yeah, I think so. Or another thing is to, of course, like if there's like a context for me to learn
Mm,
something that I
mm,
can relate to, then I,
mm,
I
mm,
will I will have a bit more interest in at least
mm,
listen to what is going on, because at
mm,
least I can apply or uh use what I have learned into my daily life, I guess, or
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
in the exams. Yeah,
Because I guess that's where you felt a bit lost in maths and physics. Maybe you weren't just
mm,
able to make that connection to real life,
I
possibly.
suppose. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the next question is, do you have any funny or strange or scary or touching moments that happened during your secondary or primary school life?
Not really. Actually, what like I'm thinking of something that happened last year when I in the classroom when I was after my lesson.
So as a
Can I talk
teacher,
about that? Yeah, as a teacher.
yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, because I had this kid after the lesson, he just came to me and he was like, "Oh, can I announce something to the whole class?" And then I was like, "Okay, go ahead." And then at first I thought it was just something like just some general reminders for the whole class, and
Yeah.
then he just shouted, "Oh, he is not my friend anymore." And then
Oh, wow.
kind of like, and then that kid who thought he was the friend of that kid,
Mm.
he was quite shocked, and then he just ran away.
Oh,
And then
wow.
I was like, why are you
So
doing this?
did
Because like,
everyone
why
just
would you?
freeze then?
Yeah, and then I asked the kid who announced the whole thing. I was like, "Well, why would you do this? Why would you suddenly like tell the whole
Mm,
class that like even to him that you are not his friend anymore?"
mm,
This is such a
mm,
I think like students now they are not very sensitive in
mm,
terms of like other people's
mm,
feelings. They just say
mm,
whatever they like.
mm.
And I kind of feel sometimes when I was a student, I also try to say whatever I like.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
So,
then sometimes yeah, upsets people. But I of course like back then I wouldn't notice or
mm,
understand why they are feeling upset because of what I said.
that's very interesting that. So you kind of almost saw yourself in that student.
Yeah, because
Very
that kid
interesting.
is also quite grumpy at times, and I was quite grumpy at times
Mm,
as well
mm.
when I was a
Yeah,
student.
yeah. And thank you for sharing that. Like, just these are the fascinating things that happen on a daily basis in classrooms, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, one more question is, what questions do you have for me, or anything that you want to ask me? Because I've been doing
Mm.
all the asking so far, right?
How would you describe me like back then?
Mm, I would say go back and check your report card. So, no, I would definitely agree that you're very talkative, a bit on the lazy side. I would
Mm,
say the best way to describe you would actually be like hidden potential,
mm,
because I could see, obviously you're quite good in English. So then of course
mm,
I saw you probably slightly differently from how your maths teacher saw you.
mm,
But I felt that there was something there which was waiting to be unearthed, waiting to be
mm,
discovered, and that you weren't as lazy as you put up to be, because I felt that you could do something when you really wanted to.
mm.
And just that you're kind of, yeah, a bit lost, I would say, kind of what you said earlier in terms of you didn't really know what you were trying to do.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and that's how I would
yeah.
describe you.
I do feel like I am more like at least looking back, I would say I'm more attentive in English lessons at least.
Of course, because you had such a good teacher.
Yeah, that's maybe that's one thing. Yeah, I guess.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I
Yeah.
just like feel like it's more relatable
Mm,
like I said, my interest is basketball, and then a lot of times I do watch a lot of NBA games,
I remember that. Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
I remember I think there was a time where we talked about sports, and then it's really something that I'm interested in.
Yeah,
So I was really attentive in that part.
yeah,
But then
yeah,
like compared to other subjects, obviously it's not
yeah.
the same case. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was, you were absolutely fine in my lesson. It was just because
Mm.
I was also your class teacher, I had to deal with things in other subjects as well.
Yeah.
Right. So, last question. Any
Mm.
teachers that you remember vividly? So, for either good or bad reasons. You don't need to drop their names if it's a bad reason.
Mm. Uh, I would say it's not just one teacher. I would say it's like in the past, like when in Form 6, when we
Mm, mm,
were trying to deal with the DSE, and then I think the Chinese department kind of had this decision where they put all the all the students who can go to university in
Mm,
the same group, and then they just kind of like put other like students who were not able to in other
mm,
classes, and then they kind of like, oh, they just they just give you exercises, and then without actually teaching you how
mm,
to complete the questions. But then at the same time, that class where the top students were in, they were receiving a lot of help.
mm.
So I was
How did you
like
feel then? Yeah.
kind of like feeling left out or given
Mm,
up,
mm,
because like even like no matter how bad or how weak that student is, you should at least try to, like, as a teacher, that's your job to
mm,
try your best to help the students. But then there was really no help at all back then.
mm. So you kind of felt helpless and you felt left out.
Mm.
And
Yeah, and then
yeah, it doesn't sound good at all. No.
yeah, and then like because in S6, like closing to DSC, I really tried to catch up with my
Yeah,
results.
yeah, yeah.
Finally have the motivation, or finally realize I have to start working, and then but then there was no help at all. I really had to go to tutorial classes, and then try
Mm.
to catch up with as much as I could.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, thanks for sharing that because
Mm,
obviously I can speak forever about this idea of streaming
mm,
students or putting a label onto them. And it's definitely,
mm,
like you said, not a very nice feeling, particularly when you're the
mm,
ones who are labeled like in a sense, they labeled you as not good enough to go to university,
mm.
right? And
Because they even call the top students, they call it the U class, I think. U for
like
university.
university, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I wonder what label they put on the
I
others.
have no idea. But then
Anyway,
yeah.
thank you so much for sharing that. But I just want to end by saying, like your journey has been difficult and has been long, but it's also been very
Mm,
inspiring. So again, when I reflect back on when you were a student, would I have thought that you would one day become a teacher and be
mm,
inspiring other students? I definitely probably wouldn't. And so, yes, you've taken a long journey, but I feel that each step of the way has been like a learning uh path and like a stepping stone towards kind of bringing you to the person you are today. Yeah. So
mm,
uh, keep inspiring your own students and be the teacher that you maybe didn't have back then. And yeah, thank
mm.
you so much for coming onto this
Thank you.
podcast.
Thank you for having me.
After speaking to Oscar, I really reflected on the conversation and realized that Oscar was telling us all the things that teachers shouldn't be doing in the classroom. Teaching that was one directional, that lacked interaction, teaching with little or no context, the teacher not trying to get to know the students beyond their own subjects, and labeling students, putting them in boxes. You're university worthy, you are not. So it leaves us with a lot of food for thought. Can we do better than that? I hope you enjoyed listening to Oscar's extraordinary story, and please do join us again next time on Ordinary Teachers and Students.